I was halfway through clearing my driveway when the police cruiser pulled up, lights flashing blue and red against the pristine white snow that had dumped on Boulder, Colorado overnight. My snowblower was roaring so loud I didn't even hear them approach until Officer Martinez stepped out and waved to get my attention. I killed the engine and pulled off my gloves, steam rising from my sweaty hands despite the bitter February cold. "Morning, officer. Something wrong?" He looked uncomfortable, which immediately told me this wasn't about anything serious. "Good morning, sir. We received a complaint about your snow removal. A Mrs. Patricia Henderson called saying you're violating HOA regulations by piling snow on the sidewalk." I blinked at him, then looked at the neat piles of snow I'd been creating along the edge of my property, well away from the sidewalk. I'm not on the sidewalk, and more importantly, I'm not in an HOA. Officer Martinez pulled out a small notebook. "This is 4782 Maple Ridge Drive, correct?" "That's right. And you're the homeowner?" "Yep, Yancy Lawson. Bought this place 6 months ago." I gestured at the house behind me, a modest 2-story craftsman that I'd fallen in love with the moment I saw it. "Best decision I ever made moving here from Denver." The officer flipped through his notes. "Mrs. Henderson was very insistent that this property is part of the Maple Ridge Estates HOA and that you're in violation of multiple bylaws." I couldn't help but laugh. "Officer, I specifically bought a house that wasn't in an HOA. That was my #1 requirement when I was house hunting. I dealt with an HOA nightmare at my last place in Denver, with their rules about what color you could paint your mailbox and how high your grass could be. When I found this place, my realtor confirmed 3 times that it wasn't part of any HOA. I even had my lawyer review the deed before closing." Officer Martinez relaxed visibly. "Can you prove that?" "Absolutely. Give me 2 minutes." I jogged up to my front door, boots crunching in the snow, and grabbed the folder I kept with all my important house documents. When I came back out, I handed him copies of my deed and the title report. "See? No HOA restrictions, no covenants, nothing. This property has never been part of Maple Ridge Estates." He studied the documents, then nodded. "This is pretty clear. Mind if I take a photo of these for our records?" "Go ahead." While he snapped pictures with his phone, I noticed a silver Lexus SUV parked down the street, idling with exhaust puffing into the cold air. I had a feeling I knew who was sitting inside. "Officer, where exactly is Mrs. Henderson right now?" He glanced over his shoulder. "That would be her vehicle. She insisted on accompanying us to make sure we address the violation properly. Would you mind if I had a word with her?" "That's up to you, sir. You're not obligated to speak with her." "Oh, I want to." I started walking toward the Lexus, and Officer Martinez followed, probably sensing this might get interesting. I knocked on the driver's side window. It took a moment, but eventually the window lowered to reveal a woman in her mid-50s with the kind of severe haircut that screamed, "I demand to speak to managers for sport." She was wearing what looked like expensive athleisure wear and enough jewelry to fund a small country. "Can I help you?" she asked in a tone that suggested helping me was the last thing she wanted to do. "Mrs. Henderson, I'm Yancy Lawson. I understand you called the police about my snow removal." "Yes, and it's about time someone addressed your flagrant disregard for our community standards. The bylaws clearly state that snow must be removed within 12 hours of snowfall and cannot be piled in a way that obstructs pedestrian traffic or creates an eyesore." I leaned against her car door, keeping my voice pleasant. "Here's the thing, Mrs. Henderson. I'm not part of your HOA. Never have been. This property isn't in Maple Ridge Estates." Her perfectly manicured eyebrows shot up. "That's absurd. Every home on this street is part of our association. Every home except mine. I have the deed right here. I held up the papers. No HOA, no restrictions, no bylaws that apply to me. Which means you just wasted police resources on a false complaint. Her face flushed red. That can't be right. Let me see those documents. No. The single word seemed to short-circuit her brain. Excuse me, I said no. These are my private documents, and I don't owe you anything. Officer Martinez has already verified them. That's all that matters. Patricia's knuckles went white on her steering wheel. Young man, I am the president of the Maple Ridge Estates HOA, and I've been managing this community for 8 years. I know every property in our jurisdiction. Apparently not, because mine isn't one of them. Officer Martinez stepped in. Madam, I've reviewed Mr. Lawson's deed and title report. His property is definitely not part of your HOA. I'm going to have to ask you to please verify your information before making future police reports. But the map, she fumbled with her phone, pulling up what looked like a satellite image with property lines marked. See, his house is clearly within our boundaries. I leaned in to look at the screen, then actually laughed. Mrs. Henderson, that map is wrong. Look at the address numbers. You've got the boundary line drawn on the wrong side of my property. My house is 4782. The HOA properties start at 4784 and go up from there. We're on the same street, but I'm outside your jurisdiction. She stared at the map, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. Officer Martinez checked his own phone, probably pulling up county property records. Mr. Lawson is correct. Madam, your HOA boundary ends approximately 15 feet east of his property line. This is unacceptable, Patricia sputtered. How was I supposed to know? The houses all look like they are part of the same development. Maybe by checking property records before harassing people and calling the police. I suggested sweetly, her eyes narrowed. There's no need for that tone. I was simply trying to maintain our community standards. Your community. Not mine, I straightened up. Officer Martinez, are we done here? Yes, sir. Sorry for the inconvenience. He turned to Patricia. Mrs. Henderson, please make sure you have accurate information before filing future reports. Knowingly making false police reports is a crime. I didn't knowingly do anything, she protested. This was an honest mistake. Then I suggest you update your records to prevent it from happening again. I walked back to my driveway, fired up my snowblower, and got back to work. Officer Martinez and his partner drove off, but Patricia sat in her car for another 10 minutes, probably fuming, before finally leaving. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 days later, I came home from my job at the software company downtown to find a certified letter taped to my front door. Inside was an official-looking document on Maple Ridge Estates, HOA letterhead, informing me that I was in violation of multiple covenants and restrictions, including improper snow removal, failure to maintain approved exterior paint colors, and having an unapproved vehicle parked in my driveway. The letter demanded I remedy these violations within 14 days or face fines starting at $500 per day. I stood in my kitchen, reading the letter 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Then I pulled out my phone and called my lawyer, Robert Chen, who'd handled my house closing. Yancy, good to hear from you. How's the new place? It's great, except for the HOA that doesn't have any jurisdiction over me trying to fine me for violations of rules that don't apply to me. There was a pause. Run that by me again. I explained the whole situation, from Patricia calling the cops to this latest letter. Robert listened without interrupting, which I'd learned meant he was taking mental notes. Email me a scan of that letter, he said when I finished. This is pretty straightforward harassment. They have no legal authority over your property, which means they have no right to levy fines or demand compliance with their rules. So what do I do? For now, nothing. Don't respond to their letter. Don't acknowledge their authority. Don't engage with them at all. I'll draft a cease and desist letter explaining that your property is not within their jurisdiction and demanding they stop contacting you. If they persist after that, we can look at further legal action. How much is this going to cost me? The cease and desist. I'll do it for $300. Consider it an extension of the work I did for your closing. If it goes beyond that, we'll talk. Thanks, Robert. I appreciate it. No problem. And Yancy, document everything. Every letter, every interaction, every time you see them on your property. If this escalates, you'll want a paper trail. I spent the rest of the evening setting up a dedicated folder on my computer for HOA documentation. I scanned Patricia's letter, made notes about the police visit, and even went back through my security camera footage. I'd installed cameras when I moved in, mostly for package theft prevention, but now I was grateful for the comprehensive coverage of my front yard and driveway. The cease and desist letter went out 3 days later via certified mail. I got the tracking confirmation that Patricia had signed for it on a Thursday afternoon. By Friday evening, she was standing on my front porch, hammering on my door hard enough to rattle the frame. I checked the doorbell camera feed on my phone before answering. Patricia was alone, still dressed in her expensive casual wear, her face twisted in anger. I grabbed my phone, set it to record video, and opened the door but left the storm door latched between us. "Can I help you, Mrs. Henderson?" "You sent me a cease and desist letter. How dare you? I'm trying to maintain property values for this entire neighborhood, and you're acting like some kind of criminal. Actually, you're the one acting outside the law. You're trying to enforce rules on a property that isn't subject to your HOA's authority. That's harassment. It's not harassment to expect people to maintain basic standards. Your house is bringing down the whole street." I glanced past her at my house. I'd painted it a nice sage green with white trim the previous fall. The yard was neat, the driveway was clear, and everything was well maintained. What exactly is wrong with my house? That color, it's not on our approved palette. Good thing I don't need your approval then. And that truck. She pointed at my F-150 parked in the driveway. Commercial vehicles aren't allowed in residential driveways. It's not a commercial vehicle, it's my personal truck. It has a toolbox in the bed. That makes it commercial. I couldn't help but laugh. "Mrs. Henderson, first of all, that's not how the law works. Second of all, even if it were, your rules don't apply to me. Third, you need to leave my property now. I'm not going anywhere until you agree to comply with our standards. Then you're trespassing and I'm going to call the police." I pulled up the phone app on my screen where she could see it. She stepped back, her face going through several shades of red. "This isn't over. You can't just ignore the HOA because you think you're special." "I'm not ignoring the HOA. I'm simply not part of it. There's a difference. Now please leave before I have you charged with trespassing." She turned and stalked back to her Lexus, muttering what sounded like curses under her breath. I closed the door, saved the video footage, and sent a copy to Robert with a detailed email about what had just happened. His response came back within an hour. "This woman is unhinged. If she contacts you again, call the police immediately and report it. We may need to pursue a restraining order." I hoped it wouldn't come to that, but Patricia seemed like the type who couldn't handle being told no. The next week passed quietly, and I started to think maybe the cease and desist letter had finally gotten through to her. Then, I came home on a Wednesday to find an orange sticker plastered across my front door, declaring my property in violation of county code and subject to immediate inspection. My stomach dropped. This looked official with a county seal and everything. I peeled it off carefully and brought it inside, then called the county code enforcement office. Code enforcement, this is Jennifer. Hi, my name is Yancy Lawson. I just got home to find a violation sticker on my door, but I'm not sure what it's about. The sticker doesn't actually say what the violation is. Can you give me your address and the citation number on the sticker? I read off the information. I heard typing on the other end, then a long pause. Sir, I'm not showing any open cases or violations for your address. What does this sticker look like exactly? I described it in detail, and Jennifer asked me to email a photo. I did, and heard her sharp intake of breath when she opened it. Mr. Lawson, that's a fake. Someone created a counterfeit county violation notice. The seal is wrong, the format is wrong, and most importantly, we don't have any record of issuing it. Are you serious? Completely. This is actually a crime. Someone is impersonating a county official. Do you have any idea who might have done this? I explained the whole situation with Patricia and the HOA. Jennifer listened, then said, I think you need to file a police report about this. What this person is doing goes beyond HOA harassment. Counterfeiting government documents is a felony. I thanked her, hung up, and immediately called the Boulder Police non-emergency line. They sent an officer out within the hour. A different one this time, Officer Dawson, a woman in her 40s who took detailed notes while I explained everything and showed her my documentation. You've been thorough, she said, reviewing my folder of evidence. That's going to help a lot. The fake county notice is the most serious issue here. That's forgery and impersonating a government official. Both are felonies. I don't want to ruin someone's life over HOA drama, I said, but this is getting out of hand. Mr. Lawson, this stopped being HOA drama when she created fake government documents. That's a line you don't cross. I'm going to take this report and forward it to our detective division. Someone will likely want to talk to you in the next few days. She took the fake sticker as evidence, gave me a case number, and left. I sat on my couch, wondering how clearing my driveway had spiraled into a criminal investigation. The detective, a tired-looking guy named Martinez, no relation to the first officer, called me 2 days later. Mr. Lawson, I've reviewed your case. Before we proceed with investigating Mrs. Henderson, I need to ask, are you certain you want to pursue this? Once we start pulling on this thread, we can't stop just because it gets uncomfortable. Detective, I just want to live in my house in peace. If that means holding someone accountable for breaking the law, then yes, I want to pursue it. Fair enough. I'm going to need to interview Mrs. Henderson. I'm also going to be requesting security footage from homes in your area for the day that sticker appeared. If we can catch her on camera placing it, that's our case right there. I have security cameras. Want me to send you my footage? That would be extremely helpful, yes. I uploaded the relevant footage to a secure link and sent it to him. About 4 hours later, he called back. Mr. Lawson, your cameras are very high quality. Thanks. We have clear footage of Mrs. Patricia Henderson approaching your door at 2:15 p.m. on Wednesday, looking around to see if anyone was watching, and placing the fake sticker on your door. We can even see the sheet of stickers in her hand. So, what happens now? Now I go have a conversation with Mrs. Henderson. I'll be in touch. I spent the rest of the day trying to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting. Part of me felt guilty. Patricia was a busybody and a pain in the neck, but did she really deserve felony charges? Then I remembered her face when she'd pounded on my door, the entitled rage that someone would dare not follow her rules, and the guilt faded. She'd had multiple chances to back off. She'd chosen to escalate instead. Detective Martinez called me the next afternoon. That was an interesting conversation. Oh, Mrs. Henderson initially denied everything. Then I showed her the footage, and she changed her story to say she was trying to help the county by pointing out violations. Then she said you were the real problem for not respecting the community. Eventually, she admitted to creating and posting the fake notice, but insisted she didn't think it was illegal since she was just trying to enforce standards. Is she being charged? The district attorney's office is reviewing the case. Between you and me, they'll probably offer her a plea deal on reduced charges if she agrees to stay away from you and do community service. She doesn't have a criminal record, and judges tend to be lenient on first-time offenders, especially middle-aged women who think they're doing the right thing. I felt a mix of relief and frustration. So she gets a slap on the wrist. Maybe, maybe not. Depends on the DA and the judge. But Mr. Lawson, even if she gets a lenient sentence, she'll have a criminal record. That tends to humble people pretty quickly. Plus, once the other HOA members find out their president is facing criminal charges, I suspect her reign might come to an end. From your lips to God's ears. One more thing. We're recommending a restraining order as part of any plea agreement. She won't be allowed within 300 feet of you or your property. If she violates that, she goes to jail. No plea deal, no leniency. I appreciate that, Detective. Just doing my job. I'll keep you updated on how this progresses. I thought I'd have weeks or months before anything else happened, but the neighborhood gossip mill works fast. By Saturday morning, I had 3 different neighbors I'd never met before stopping by to ask if it was true that Patricia Henderson had been arrested. Not arrested, I explained to the third one, a friendly guy named Doug who lived 4 houses down. She's being investigated for creating a fake county violation notice. Doug whistled. Patricia's always been intense about the HOA stuff, but that's next level crazy. Why'd she target you? Because I'm not in the HOA and she couldn't handle that someone on this street wasn't subject to her rules. Wait, you're not in the HOA? Doug looked stunned. How'd you pull that off? I didn't pull anything off. My property was never part of Maple Ridge Estates. It's just geography. Man, you're lucky. Last year, Patricia tried to fine me $2,000 because my fence was 4 inches too tall according to some obscure bylaw. I had to cut off the top rail and replace it with something shorter. Cost me $800. That's insane. That's Patricia. She treats the HOA like her personal kingdom. He paused. Actually, can I ask you something? If this goes to trial or whatever, would you mind if I wrote a letter about my experiences with her? Not to pile on, but just to show this is a pattern of behavior, not a one-time mistake. That's between you and the DA's office, but I don't have any problem with it. Over the next few days, I learned that Doug wasn't alone. Patricia had apparently terrorized the neighborhood for years with nitpicky violations, arbitrary rule enforcement, and fines for the smallest infractions. People were afraid of her because she could make their lives miserable, and fighting an HOA fine often cost more than just paying it. One woman, Sandra, told me she'd been fined 3 times in 1 month for having the wrong shade of mulch in her flower beds. I had to special order the approved mulch from a supplier 2 hours away. It cost 4 times what the normal mulch cost, and honestly, I can't even tell the difference. Another neighbor, Tom, had been cited for parking his car on the street overnight when his garage door opener broke. It was one night. And she wanted to fine me $100. I ended up fixing the opener myself at 11 p.m. just to avoid the fine. The stories kept coming, and I started to realize that Patricia's harassment of me wasn't personal. It was just what she did. I was simply the first person she'd encountered who wasn't under her thumb. 2 weeks after the investigation started, I got a call from an assistant district attorney named Rachel Tompkins. "Mr. Lawson, I wanted to update you on the Henderson case. We've offered her a plea deal. 1 count of criminal mischief, a misdemeanor, in exchange for 12 months probation, 60 hours of community service, and a 2-year restraining order prohibiting contact with you or your property." "What about the forgery and impersonation charges?" "Those were bargaining chips. The reality is, it's hard to get a jury to throw the book at a middle-aged woman with no record over what she'll characterize as a neighborhood dispute. The plea deal ensures she faces consequences and stays away from you without us having to roll the dice at trial." I didn't love it, but I understood the practical reality. "Has she accepted?" Her lawyer is reviewing the terms. "I expect an answer by early next week. In the meantime, she's been ordered to have no contact with you. If she violates that, let me know immediately." "Will do. Thanks for keeping me informed." "Of course. Oh, and Mr. Lawson, we've received about a dozen letters from other residents in your area describing similar behavior from Mrs. Henderson. While those incidents don't factor into this specific case, they've given us a clear picture of her mindset. The judge will see those at sentencing." I hung up feeling cautiously optimistic. Maybe this nightmare was finally winding down. That optimism lasted exactly 4 days. I was working from home on a Tuesday when my doorbell rang. I checked the camera and saw a man in his 60s wearing a suit, holding a briefcase. He didn't look threatening, so I answered the door. "Mr. Lawson, my name is Gerald Henderson. I'm Patricia's husband. Could I have a moment of your time?" Every warning bell in my head went off. "Sir, your wife is under a court order not to contact me. That includes sending people to contact me on her behalf." He held up his hands. "I'm not here on her behalf. In fact, she doesn't know I'm here. I wanted to apologize for what she's put you through and see if there's any way to resolve this situation." I studied him for a moment. He looked genuinely distressed, with deep circles under his eyes. "Mr. Henderson, your wife committed a crime. This isn't something we can just resolve between us. I understand that. I'm not asking you to drop charges or anything like that. I just wanted you to know that not everyone in my family agrees with what Patricia did. And I wanted to explain something that might help you understand, even if it doesn't excuse her behavior." Against my better judgment, I opened the storm door. "You've got 5 minutes." He stepped into my entryway, looking around nervously. "Patricia hasn't always been like this. When we first moved here 15 years ago, she was involved in the community but not obsessive about it. Then our daughter died in a car accident 8 years ago. Patricia threw herself into the HOA as a way to cope, a way to feel like she had control over something." My chest tightened. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you. The problem is that need for control never went away. It got worse. The HOA became her entire identity. She stopped seeing neighbors as people and started seeing them as problems to fix. I've tried to get her to see a therapist, to step back from the HOA, but she won't listen. She thinks I'm betraying her by suggesting there's anything wrong." "Mr. Henderson, I genuinely am sorry for what your family went through, but your wife harassed me, lied to the police, and forged government documents. I can't just let that go because she's dealing with grief. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking if you'd be willing to include a request for mandatory counseling as part of whatever sentence she receives. She needs help, and she won't get it unless a court orders her to." I thought about it. "I can mention it to the DA's office. I can't make any promises beyond that." His shoulders sagged with relief. "That's all I'm asking. Thank you." He pulled out a business card and handed it to me. "If Patricia violates the restraining order or does anything else to bother you, please call me. I'll do whatever I can to stop her." After he left, I sat on my couch for a long time, thinking about grief and control and the ways people's pain can spill out and hurt others. I felt sympathy for Patricia. I really did. But sympathy didn't mean I was willing to be her punching bag. I called Rachel Tompkins and told her about Gerald's visit and his request. She listened thoughtfully. "That's actually a good idea. I'll include a requirement for counseling in the plea agreement. It'll help her and it'll make the judge more likely to approve the deal." "Good, thanks." "One more thing, Mr. Lawson. We have a sentencing date scheduled for March 15th, assuming Mrs. Henderson accepts the plea deal. You have the right to make a victim impact statement. You can do it in person or submit it in writing. It's up to you. I'll think about it and let you know." Patricia accepted the plea deal the following Monday. According to Rachel, her lawyer had explained in very clear terms that going to trial risked felony convictions and potential jail time, and even Patricia wasn't stubborn enough to gamble on that. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. on March 15th. I took the morning off work and drove to the Boulder County Courthouse, a modern building with lots of glass and steel. Rachel met me in the hallway outside the courtroom. "Are you doing the victim statement?" "In person, if that's okay." "Absolutely. Just tell the judge what this has put you through and what outcome you're hoping for. Be honest, be clear, and don't exaggerate. This judge doesn't like drama." I nodded, my stomach churning. I'd never done anything like this before. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with maybe 20 seats for spectators. Patricia was already there, sitting at the defense table with her lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s. Patricia looked diminished somehow, smaller than she had when she'd been yelling at me. Gerald sat in the front row behind her, his face carefully neutral. The judge, a black woman in her 50s named Judge Kimberly Torres, entered and everyone stood. She went through the formalities quickly, confirming that Patricia understood the plea agreement and accepted its terms. "Does the state wish to make any statements before sentencing?" Judge Torres asked. Rachel stood. "Yes, Your Honor. This case involves a pattern of harassment targeting Mr. Yancy Lawson, who purchased a home adjacent to the Maple Ridge Estates HOA. Mrs. Henderson, as president of that HOA, repeatedly attempted to enforce rules and restrictions on Mr. Lawson's property, despite having no legal authority to do so. When Mr. Lawson resisted, Mrs. Henderson escalated to creating and posting a counterfeit county violation notice, which is what brings us here today. She went on to outline the facts of the case, including the fake sticker and Patricia's initial denials. Then she mentioned the letters from other neighbors. "Your Honor, while those incidents aren't part of this case, they establish that this isn't an isolated incident born of a misunderstanding. This is a pattern of behavior in which Mrs. Henderson abuses her position to control and intimidate others." Judge Torres made notes. "Does the defense wish to respond?" Patricia's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, Mrs. Henderson deeply regrets her actions. This situation arose from a genuine, if misguided, desire to maintain property values in her community. She admits she went too far and takes full responsibility. She's already resigned as HOA president and has committed to staying away from Mr. Lawson. She's asking the court to show leniency given her lack of criminal history and her family circumstances." The lawyer briefly mentioned their daughter's death without going into detail. Judge Torres's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. "Grief is not a license to harass others. Does the victim wish to make a statement?" Rachel gestured to me. I stood, my legs feeling wobbly, and walked to the podium facing the judge. "Your Honor, my name is Yancy Lawson. 6 months ago, I bought my first house. It was the culmination of years of saving and planning. I specifically chose a house that wasn't in an HOA because I'd had bad experiences with one in Denver. I did my research, hired a lawyer, and made sure everything was clear before I closed on the property. I took a breath, organizing my thoughts. Mrs. Henderson's actions turned what should have been a happy time into a nightmare. I've had to hire a lawyer, deal with police visits, and spend hours documenting everything in case this ended up in court. I've lost sleep worrying about what she might do next. And the worst part is, none of this was necessary. If she'd simply checked her records when I first told her I wasn't in the HOA, this all could have been avoided. I glanced at Patricia, who was staring at her hands. I've learned a lot about Mrs. Henderson's history, including the loss of her daughter. I'm truly sorry for that. But her pain doesn't give her the right to cause pain for others. I'm asking the court to approve the plea agreement, including the counseling requirement, and to make sure the restraining order is enforced. I just want to live in my house in peace. I sat down, my heart pounding. Judge Torres reviewed some papers, then looked up at Patricia. Mrs. Henderson, do you have anything you'd like to say before I impose sentence? Patricia stood slowly. Her voice was quiet, almost inaudible. I'm sorry. I thought I was helping. I thought if I could just keep everything perfect and under control, then nothing else bad would happen. I know that doesn't make sense. I know I was wrong. I'm sorry. Judge Torres was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke. Mrs. Henderson, I've read the letters from your neighbors. I've read the police reports. I've read about your daughter. Here's what I see. A woman who experienced a terrible tragedy and channeled her grief into control. That's understandable. What's not understandable is harming others in the process. She outlined the sentence: 12 months probation, 60 hours of community service, mandatory counseling, and a 2-year restraining order. If you violate any term of this sentence, you will be brought back before me and I will not be lenient. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. Good. I'm also ordering you to pay Mr. Lawson's legal fees up to $5,000. He shouldn't have to pay for defending himself against your harassment. I hadn't been expecting that. Rachel caught my eye and gave me a small thumbs up. Judge Torres banged her gavel. We're adjourned. I walked out of the courthouse feeling like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Rachel caught up with me in the parking lot. That went well. Judge Torres doesn't usually award legal fees in these cases, but the letters from your neighbors made an impact. Thank you for everything. Just doing my job. With any luck, this is the last you'll hear from Patricia Henderson. I drove home, picked up lunch from my favorite sandwich shop, and spent the afternoon catching up on work. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could actually relax. That evening, I got an email from Doug, the neighbor I'd talked to early on. Hey Yancy, just wanted to let you know there's an emergency HOA meeting tonight. A bunch of us are planning to vote in a new board and completely revamp the bylaws. Patricia might be gone, but the system that let her get away with this stuff for so long needs to change too. Thought you'd want to know. I wrote back wishing him luck. It wasn't my fight since I wasn't in the HOA, but I hoped they'd succeed. Nobody should have to live in fear of their HOA president. The rest of March passed quietly. I didn't see Patricia at all, which was a relief. I did see Gerald once, getting his mail, and we exchanged polite waves. I didn't hold any grudges against him. He was dealing with his own struggles. In early April, Doug stopped by with a 6-pack of beer and some news. We did it. Completely new HOA board, and we rewrote most of the bylaws. No more fines for trivial stuff, clearer appeal processes, and term limits for all positions. Patricia ruled this place like a fiefdom, but that's over now. We sat on my back deck. enjoying the spring weather and the sight of the mountains in the distance. I'm glad things worked out. Thanks to you, honestly. If you hadn't stood up to her, the rest of us might never have found the courage. She had everyone convinced she was untouchable. She wasn't evil, just broken. Maybe, but broken people can still cause a lot of damage. He took a sip of beer. So, are you glad you moved here? Aside from the HOA drama, I looked around at my yard, my house, the mountains beyond. Yeah, I really am. This is home. And it was. Despite everything, I'd found exactly what I was looking for. A place that was mine, where I could make my own choices and live by my own rules. Patricia's campaign of harassment had been stressful and costly, but it hadn't broken me. If anything, it had strengthened my resolve to protect what I'd worked so hard to achieve. The community service Patricia was assigned turned out to be working at a local food bank. According to Gerald, who I occasionally ran into at the grocery store, she'd initially been resentful about it, but had eventually started to engage with the work. The counseling seemed to be helping too. She wasn't suddenly a different person, but she was at least starting to understand why her behavior had been harmful. She asked me to tell you she's sorry, Gerald said one day in late May. She knows she can't contact you directly because of the restraining order, but she wanted you to know. I appreciate that. I hope she continues to heal. So do I. Life settled into a comfortable routine. Work was going well, I'd made friends with several neighbors, and my house was exactly what I'd hoped it would be. I painted the guest room, planted a vegetable garden in the backyard, and even adopted a dog from the local shelter, a German Shepherd mix named Bruno, who loved snow almost as much as he loved stealing my socks. When winter came around again, I was ready. I'd upgraded to a more powerful snowblower, and I'd mapped out exactly where I'd pile the snow to keep my driveway and walkway clear. On the first major snowfall of the season, I was outside at 6 a.m., clearing everything before I had to log in for work. Doug came out to work on his own driveway and called over, "No police visits this year." Not a one. Progress. I finished my snow removal, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat by my front window watching the snow fall. Bruno curled up at my feet, snoring softly. This was what I'd wanted all along: peace, quiet, and the freedom to take care of my own property in my own way. The restraining order was set to last 2 years, through March of next year. I didn't know what would happen after that, whether Patricia would respect my boundaries or whether I'd have to deal with her again. But I wasn't worried. I'd stood up for myself once, and I'd do it again if I had to. More importantly, I'd learned that sometimes the hardest part of owning a home isn't the mortgage or the maintenance. It's dealing with people who think they have a right to control what isn't theirs. Patricia had learned that lesson the hard way, through criminal charges and a permanent record. I hoped others in similar positions would learn it more easily. In June, I got an unexpected letter in the mail. It was from the Maple Ridge Estates HOA, signed by Doug in his new capacity as president. Dear Mr. Lawson, on behalf of the Maple Ridge Estates HOA, we would like to formally apologize for the harassment you experienced from our previous leadership. While we understand your property is not within our jurisdiction, you are our neighbor, and we failed to treat you with the respect and courtesy you deserved. We hope we can move forward as a community, and we invite you to our neighborhood barbecue on July 4th. No strings attached, just good food and good company. I showed the letter to Bruno, who wagged his tail enthusiastically. "What do you think, buddy? Should we go?" Bruno barked, which I took as a yes. The barbecue was actually fun. I met people I'd only waved to before, tried Sandra's famous potato salad, and played cornhole with Tom and his kids. Nobody mentioned Patricia or the HOA drama. We were just neighbors, enjoying a summer day together. As the sun set and fireworks started going off over Boulder, I stood in Doug's backyard, surrounded by people who'd become friends, and felt genuinely content. I'd bought a house to have a place of my own, but I'd gained so much more: a community, friendships, and the knowledge that I could stand up for myself when it mattered. Patricia's story wasn't a simple one of a villain getting her comeuppance. It was more complicated than that, a portrait of how pain can twist people and how systems without proper checks can enable bad behavior. She'd lost her daughter, lost control of her life, and tried to regain that control by dominating others. The criminal charges and mandated counseling had forced her to confront that, which was probably the best possible outcome for everyone involved. I saw her once more before the restraining order expired, purely by accident. I was hiking one of the mountain trails outside Boulder with Bruno when I came around a bend and found myself face to face with Patricia and Gerald. We all froze for a moment. "Mr. Lawson," Gerald said carefully. "Patricia, we should take the other path." But Patricia didn't move. She looked at me, then at Bruno, and something in her face softened. "That's a beautiful dog." "Thanks. His name is Bruno. German Shepherd mix, yeah, from the shelter." An awkward silence fell, then Patricia took a breath. "I owe you an apology, a real one, not through lawyers or my husband. What I did was wrong. I was angry and hurt, and I took it out on you when you'd done nothing to deserve it. I'm sorry." I could have said a lot of things. I could have told her she'd made my life hell for months. I could have reminded her that she'd committed crimes against me. But looking at her face, seeing the genuine remorse there, I decided to take the high road. "I accept your apology. I hope things are better for you now." "They are, slowly. Counseling helps. So does not being in charge of the HOA anymore." She attempted a small smile. "Turns out I'm not actually very good at it. Live and learn." "Indeed." She glanced at Gerald. "We should go. We don't want to violate the restraining order. We're on a public trail. I think we're okay for a brief conversation. Still, take care, Mr. Lawson. You too, Mrs. Henderson." They took the side path, and Bruno and I continued our hike. When I got home, I found myself thinking about forgiveness and justice and how they're not always the same thing. Patricia had faced consequences for her actions, which was justice. But forgiveness was something I could choose to give, not because she'd earned it, but because holding on to anger would only hurt me. I sent an email to Rachel Tompkins, letting her know about the encounter and confirming that I didn't consider it a violation of the restraining order. She wrote back thanking me for the update and noting that Patricia's probation was going well. She's completed half her community service hours, and her counselor reports good progress. Sometimes the system actually works. By the time the restraining order officially expired in March, it felt almost anticlimactic. Patricia and I existed in the same neighborhood, occasionally saw each other in passing, and exchanged polite nods. We weren't friends and never would be, but we didn't need to be enemies either. Doug's reformed HOA board was working out well from what I heard. Fines were down, disputes were handled more reasonably, and people actually seemed to like being part of the community rather than fearing it. "It's amazing what happens when you treat people with respect," Doug told me one day. Revolutionary concept, right? Who would have thought? The legal fees reimbursement from Patricia came through, which helped offset the costs of defending myself. Robert Chen, my lawyer, was pleased with how everything had turned out. This is the kind of case that reminds me why I got into law. Someone was being bullied, we stood up for them, and the system worked. I'll give you a good review on Yelp. Please do. I need all the help I can get. As spring turned to summer and then to fall, life in my little house continued to be everything I'd hoped for. I hosted game nights, took Bruno on long hikes, worked on home improvement projects, and generally enjoyed being a homeowner. The HOA drama became a story I told at parties, something that had happened but didn't define my experience. On the anniversary of buying my house, I threw a small party. Doug and his wife came, along with Sandra, Tom and his family, and a few other neighbors. We grilled burgers, played yard games, and watched the sunset from my back deck. "Speech," Doug called out at one point. "Tell us what you've learned from your first year as a homeowner." I thought about it. I've learned that home ownership is about more than just having a place to live. It's about community, boundaries, and standing up for yourself when necessary. I've learned that most people are reasonable if you give them a chance, and that the ones who aren't can be dealt with through proper channels. Mostly, I've learned that I made the right choice buying this house, and I'm grateful for all of you who have made this neighborhood feel like home. Everyone raised their drinks in a toast. Bruno barked his approval. Later, after everyone had gone home and I was cleaning up, I stood in my backyard and looked at the mountains silhouetted against the darkening sky. A year ago, I'd been excited and nervous about this new chapter of my life. I'd had no idea what was coming, no clue that a simple act of snow removal would spiral into criminal charges and court hearings, but I'd made it through. More than that, I'd thrived. The house was mine, truly mine, and no HOA president or fake county notice could take that away. I'd learned to stand my ground, to document everything, and to trust the legal system even when it felt slow and frustrating. Most importantly, I'd learned that home isn't just about the building you own. It's about the community you're part of, the boundaries you set, and the life you build within your four walls. Patricia Henderson had tried to take that from me, but she'd failed. In the end, all she'd accomplished was teaching me how strong I could be. I called Bruno inside, locked up the house, and went to bed feeling content. Tomorrow I'd get up, make coffee, maybe do some yard work if the weather held. I'd live my life on my own terms in my own house, answerable to no one but myself. And if another HOA president ever tried to claim authority over my property, well, I had a thick folder of documentation and a lawyer on speed dial. But I didn't think it would come to that. Word had spread about what happened with Patricia. I was pretty sure every HOA in Boulder County now knew to double-check their property boundaries before making accusations. The snow would fall again come winter. I'd clear my driveway again, pile the snow wherever made sense, and go about my day. And this time, the only visit I'd get would be from neighbors asking to borrow my snowblower. That was the kind of HOA drama I could live with.